All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to the show. Today we're going to be doing a deep dive into a topic that's, well, it's super important, I think, especially for those of you who are prepping for the UPSC mains exam,
Mm-hmm.
especially that current events section. We're talking about the changing landscape of warfare, how warfare is evolving, in the 21st century. But honestly, even if you're not, an aspiring civil servant, I think this deep dive is going to be packed with some really fascinating insights, about global affairs and stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Our main source for today is a recent article from the Hindu.
Okay.
It covers some really important points that were raised by the Chief of Defense Staff at Aero India 2025.
Yeah, Aero India, of course, is India's premier aerospace and defense exhibition. And the CDS, General Anil Chauhan, used it, he used that platform to really deliver kind of a stark warning
Oh, okay.
that the Indian Army needs to go beyond just acquiring new weapons. They need to think about a more complete transformation.
So it's not just about having the shiniest new toys, the fighter jets or the tanks or whatever, right?
It's about adapting to a whole new era of warfare.
So how is it different? I mean, hasn't India always kind of faced these complicated security challenges, right?
Well, what's different now is the nature of the conflict. We're moving away from these clear-cut wars with defined beginnings and ends.
Right.
We're seeing more and more of what people call perpetual war,
Perpetual war.
where the lines between peace and conflict are blurred.
Right.
There's also this rise of something called hybrid warfare,
Hybrid warfare. Okay.
which blends, traditional military tactics with things like cyber attacks, disinformation campaigns, economic pressure, all these things mixed together.
It sounds like the old rule book has been completely just thrown out.
Yeah, in a way it has. And this is where something called technological asymmetry really comes into play. Countries with more advanced technologies, AI, quantum computing, hypersonic weapons, they have a serious advantage. For example, let's talk about quantum computing for a second. It has the potential to, break our current encryption.
Really?
Think about that. A massive threat to cybersecurity and communication systems.
That's a little scary.
Something India definitely needs to think about and prepare for.
Okay, so not only is the battlefield literally more complex, in terms of where it is, like cyberspace and outer space, but the tools are getting really, really complicated and sophisticated too.
Exactly.
And this is where India is facing a critical turning point, it sounds like.
Yeah,
Now, the Hindu article mentioned this two-front threat.
right.
Could you elaborate on that a little bit? What does that mean?
Sure. India is in this difficult position where it faces threats from both China and Pakistan. The situation in eastern Ladakh, tensions surrounding the China-Pakistan economic corridor, the proxy war in Jammu and Kashmir, all of these highlight the constant security challenges India is dealing with. And then you add on top of that, China's increasing influence in the Indian Ocean. It adds another layer of complexity.
It seems like India has a lot to think about in terms of its security.
It does. And this is where we get to the internal hurdles that complicate India's defense modernization,
Okay.
because it's not just about the enemies, so to speak, out there, but what's happening within India.
And the Hindu article mentioned something like a structural issue within the Indian military, right?
Yeah, historically, there's been a big emphasis on the army and defense planning,
Mm.
and this can lead to a focus on maintaining this, very large standing army,
Okay.
which it puts a strain on the budget, and it can limit resources for modernization.
I think I remember reading something in the Hindu also about how much of the defense budget goes towards personnel costs, like people, not even equipment.
A huge chunk.
Okay.
Salaries, pensions, it eats up a lot of the budget. And this leaves less for things like research and development, acquiring new weapons, promoting domestic production.
So while India is aware of all of these changes in warfare, it seems like there are these internal kind of roadblocks.
Yeah.
What about modernizing its equipment? Because there's a lot of talk about Make in India, but has it really delivered?
Make in India has had its successes, but
Okay.
it's not a perfect solution. India still remains the world's largest arms importer. We've seen delays in producing our own, modern equipment like Tejas fighter jets, the future infantry combat vehicles. And there's a lack of synergy, really, between the Army, the Air Force, and the Navy when it comes to procuring and developing new equipment.
So we've got external threats from China and Pakistan, internal challenges with budget constraints and procurement processes, and this struggle to really achieve self-reliance in defense production.
Right.
That's a lot.
It's a complicated situation.
It is.
But it's not hopeless. India has made some some really significant strides in defense modernization, just in recent years.
Okay.
There are definitely some positive developments. We'll explore those further in the next part of our deep dive.
All right, so we've laid out the challenges. We'll be back after a quick break to discuss some of the positive developments and what steps India can take to adapt to this future of warfare. So for those of you prepping to the UPSC, make sure you take notes,
Yes.
as we'll be getting into some specific examples and policy recommendations. And for everyone else, stay tuned. We're just getting started. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment if you have any questions
Yeah, we love hearing from you.
about evolving warfare or India's defense strategy.
Absolutely.
So before the break, we were talking about some pretty serious challenges, right, for India
Yeah.
in modernizing its defense forces.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not all doom and gloom, right?
No, not at all.
The Hindu article did mention, some positive developments.
Absolutely. It's important to remember that India has actually made quite a bit of progress
Okay.
in certain areas, like, for example, the Defense Acquisition Procedure 2020.
Okay, the DAP 2020.
Yeah, the DAP 2020 brought in some really key reforms. It streamlined the whole procurement process.
Okay.
It encouraged, indigenous design and development, and it made it possible to get critical technologies much faster.
So how has this DAP 2020, how has it actually impacted modernization efforts?
Well, one of the things it did was introduce provisions like buy Indian IDDM,
Okay.
which basically means we prioritize procurement from Indian companies
Okay.
that actually designed and developed the product right here in India.
So it's about incentivizing domestic innovation.
Right, exactly. It reduces reliance on imports, and it pushes us to develop our own tech.
So we're pushing for both technological advancement, but also self-reliance in the defense sector.
Exactly, on both fronts, and we are actually seeing results. Well, for example, India has developed indigenous systems like the Danish artillery guns, the ATACMS howitzer, the Arjun tank, and of course the INS Vikrant aircraft carrier. These are not small achievements.
Right, right.
They really showcase India's, growing technological capabilities.
Now, what about Make in India? Because, we've been hearing about this a lot. What's its role been in boosting defense exports?
Make in India has definitely played a role in positioning India as a potential defense exporter. We've seen a rise in exports of defense equipment. We have programs like IDEX.
IDEX?
Yeah, innovations for defense excellence. And this is all about encouraging startups to get involved in defense innovation. So IDEF provides funding and mentoring to startups that are working on really cutting-edge technologies, things that have defense applications.
But there's been some criticism, right?
Yeah, there's definitely been challenges, bureaucratic hurdles, technology transfer issues, private sector participation could definitely be improved. But the overall direction is positive. We have things like the Surgeon portal now, which is great.
Okay.
It's a platform that promotes indigenization. Domestic vendors can offer their products and services. And the government's also been setting up these defense industrial corridors. These are all steps towards having a more robust and self-reliant defense industry.
So even though, we still have hurdles to overcome, it sounds like India's making, some real progress towards a more technologically advanced, self-sufficient, defense sector. But looking at, how quickly warfare is evolving, what are some concrete steps that India can take to further adapt and prepare for these future challenges?
Well, I think one of the most important things is boosting indigenous defense innovation.
Okay.
That means increasing funding for R&D within DRDO.
DRDO, okay.
Yeah, the Defense Research and Development Organization. And we need to foster more partnerships with private startups, universities, basically anyone who's pushing the boundaries in these critical areas.
So basically pumping resources into research and development, trying to become a leader in things like, AI-powered drones, even hypersonic weapons, all that stuff.
Imagine India leading the way in these cutting-edge technologies. It would completely change our defense capabilities.
Yeah.
It would establish India as a global power in the tech world.
That makes sense. But, developing this kind of technology takes a lot more than just money, right? What else needs to be done?
We have to integrate these new technologies into our military doctrine. Think about AI-powered systems for analyzing the battlefield in real time, drone swarms for all kinds of tasks. We need sophisticated cyber warfare capabilities.
So we're really talking about a complete overhaul, right?
A paradigm shift, definitely.
A shift from these traditional methods to a more, technologically driven approach.
It has to happen. And we need to revamp training for everyone. Our soldiers, our sailors, our airmen, they need the skills to operate in this new environment.
So we're talking AI, robotics, cybersecurity, asymmetric warfare strategies. That's a lot.
It is, but it's essential. And to manage such a technologically advanced force, we need to move towards a more unified command structure.
Okay. I've heard experts talk about this before. The need for better integration between all the branches.
It's absolutely crucial. Imagine a scenario where a hostile nation launches a cyber attack,
Okay.
crippling our infrastructure, and then follows it up with coordinated air and missile strikes.
That's a scary thought.
Responding to that kind of attack requires instant communication, cooperation between the Army, the Navy, the Air Force.
Yeah.
A unified command structure makes that possible.
Right. So, what else should India be considering?
Global engagement is really important. I need to strengthen our partnerships with other technologically advanced militaries, like the US, Israel, France. Joint exercises, technology sharing, collaborative research, these are all key to staying at the forefront.
So it's not just about developing our own capabilities, it's also about learning from and collaborating with others.
Exactly. We can learn from the best, fast track our own development, and aligning with, these emerging doctrines like those coming out of NATO and the Quad.
Hmm.
That can really help shape global security in a way that benefits India and its allies.
So we've talked about strengthening innovation at home, integrating new technologies, revamping training, unified command structure, engaging with global partners. It's not just about, military might, but a more holistic approach, like bringing in technology, strategy, and diplomacy. It's all connected.
You got it. Adapting to the future of warfare requires a multifaceted approach. And that brings us to a question that I think really captures the imagination. What does the future actually hold? What will it look like?
That's the big question, right? What kind of future scenarios should policymakers be preparing for?
It's tough to predict exactly what the future of warfare will look like, but if we look at the trends, we can get at least a glimpse of what might be coming. We've talked about AI, drones, cyber warfare, but what about robot warfare?
Robot warfare.
Like autonomous machines actually fighting.
Like the Terminator or something. That sounds like a sci-fi movie.
Yeah, maybe, but think about it. We're already seeing autonomous vehicles being developed for the military.
Right.
And the whole concept of drone swarms, where you have multiple drones acting like a single unit, that's advancing so quickly, it's not, out of the realm of possibility that we could see battles fought entirely by machines.
Wow. So, controlled by people remotely?
Potentially, or even operating independently, based on some pre-programmed algorithm.
Hmm. That raises a ton of questions, though, right? I mean, how do you even make sure that humans are still in control of these weapon systems? What about international law, rules of engagement, all of that?
Yeah, you're right. There are some huge ethical and strategic questions. I mean, how do we even regulate this stuff? The international community is definitely struggling with that.
And what about space? You mentioned earlier the potentially for conflict, extending beyond Earth. What would that even look like?
Well, unfortunately, the militarization of space has already started. Countries are developing anti-satellite weapons, space-based surveillance systems, even technologies for actual space warfare.
So instead of just land, sea, and air, we could be looking at conflicts in cyberspace, robot warfare, drone battles, and even space warfare.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about.
It is. It's a little overwhelming.
And it means India has to have a defense strategy that is adaptable, forward-looking. We have to develop our own counterspace capabilities to protect our own assets, but we should also be involved in international efforts to prevent the weaponization of space altogether. Because the stakes are really high. Think about it. Satellites getting hacked or jammed, disrupting communications, navigation systems. Even worse, kinetic attacks that destroy satellites, creating this debris field that could just cripple space-based infrastructure for, who knows how long, decades.
That's a scary thought. It's not just about, which military is the strongest anymore. It's about, everyone on the planet and global stability.
It is. And there's more. Think about the combination of biotechnology and warfare.
Okay, so this is where it gets even more, science fiction-y, right?
Well, things like gene editing, that could be used to enhance human capabilities or create totally new types of bioweapons. You could even target specific populations based on their genes.
Wow.
It really changes what we think of as warfare, right?
Mm-hmm.
The point is, the future is unpredictable. And we have to be ready for anything, really. We need to be able to anticipate threats, develop new technologies and strategies, and make sure we have, the ethical frameworks in place to deal with all of this. Because one thing's for sure, warfare is going to keep changing in ways that we can't even imagine right now.
So for our listeners out there, especially those of you who might be thinking about joining India's defense forces, maybe working in policymaking, The message is you got to be adaptable. You got to be innovative. You got to think outside the box.
Couldn't agree more. India has the potential to not only protect itself, but to really help shape the future of warfare in a way that, that promotes global peace and stability.
Well, this has been a fascinating look at the future of warfare. Really interesting deep dive. For those of you prepping for the UPSC, this is important stuff. It's going to be on the mains and the prelims, so make sure you do your research, really think about these issues. And for everyone else, hopefully this is giving you something to think about as well. Let us know in the comments what innovations you think are going to shape the battlefields of the future. Like and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives on all sorts of issues. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening.
And a reminder that all this information is from a recent article in The Hindu, so check it out.